Captain, people are dying down there. Is this madness? Transformation unitology teaches us? It could change everything. And that's what worries me.
Hello, welcome to Access. My name's Nathan, and this is a video about Dead Space. Dead Space is a game that's meant a lot to me for a long time. I loved it when it first came out on PS3 in 2008. It still forms a light and shade double bill with fellow EA title Mirror's Edge from that year. I revisited the game during the peak years of PS4 when I was struck by how well the distinctive visuals and gameplay held up. And most recently I played it through again a few months after the release of PS5 to finally pick up the Platinum Trophy. I was still obsessed with it after all this time because this is a game with rare staying power. So where does that come from? As I've been saying for more than a decade, the best thing about Dead Space is all of Dead Space. This is both a joke and also not a joke, in that while there are loads of things I love about Dead Space and I'm about to talk about for ages, they all come from the same place, an unusually clear and consistent identity. All games start with a plan and a set of design objectives, but few are as well defined or as well executed as that of Dead Space, the please let us make this project of a talented internal team who patched together a prototype while working on EA's James Bond license. This is a lean, disciplined game with something to say, something about resourcefulness and capability, about heroes being able to create as well as destroy, and about always watching to the end of video messages. So bear that in mind. Dead Space is the grisly end of sci-fi as learned from the blue-collar crew of Alien's Nostromo. The future, it says, will be a place where replacing washers and making sure we can all breathe during transgalactic flight will be more important than having a name like Dex Forearm and regenerating health. Our hero is Isaac Clarke, and he fixes things. Trams, lifts, shuttles, and he does so while wearing a rusty brown rig, the overalls of the 26th century.
I need you to get that centrifuge operational.
As an engineer, he's likably functional, and the game is impressively focused around him. His weapons are tools, cutters, saws and flamethrowers, and his enemies require precision dismemberment rather than undirected aggression. He is the earnest autumn afternoon shed dad of video game protagonists. All of which is to say there's a purity to Dead Space and to its science fiction, an efficiency of character, presentation and even language. Dead Space is good from the moment it begins. The game's opening scene is a model of sharp exposition that introduces tensions and subplots while throwing in an evocative set of world-building jargon, planet cracker, gravity tethers, encoders. It helps that it looks dazzling too, calmly taken in from the single-shot perspective of a cockpit overlooking a dramatic space scene, a fractured planet, a crippled ship, and a scattered debris field backlit by a glowering sun. In a game marked by visual discipline and style rather than flamboyance, it's an extravagant opener.
Feels too strong!
This is a world not in need of a hero so much as a high-functioning spanner in a spacesuit.
Decontamination sequence activated. Please stand by.
Meet Isaac Clarke, a man so efficient he remains silent throughout the game and whose face isn't shown until the very last scene, when even then he looks flabbergasted rather than stoic or prominently jawed. Whether by design or necessity, that initial prototype was scraped together by a small team using borrowed tech, Isaac is as much a tool as the improvised weapons he uses to cut through his enemies. So there's an elegance to Isaac's simplicity, but there's also a sophistication to the world Dead Space builds around him. The game's basic blocks of interaction, its sound effects and UI design superbly convey a sense of both futurism and functionality. Again, something is owed to Alien here, and to that analogue future collectively imagined by Hollywood on the burgeoning fringe of the blockbuster era in the 1970s and 1980s. A future of burbling pips and squawks, of holographic interfaces and workshop textures. It not only captures the same truth revealed by John Carpenter's Dark Star and George Lucas's Star Wars, that when we get to the future everything will look old already and you might have to slap the dash to hit light speed.
Watch this. Watch what?
But it does it with such accomplished uniformity that every menu navigated, every door opened, and every machine worked intensifies the reality of the world and the hold that it has on us.
Gravity restored.
We should also talk about that world itself and how it's not really a world, but a single ship, navigated in decks just like the floors of a haunted house. That Isaac travels between decks using a tram is of course just perfect. None of your utopian monorails or clinical turbo lifts here, thank you, just track trundling utility. Welcome to the USG Ishimura. Like Alien's Nostromo, it is a mining vessel, and like Alien's Weyland-Yutani Corporation, it hails ahead to our internationally conglomerated destiny.
Concordance Extraction Company, powering humanity into the future.
It's also a densely packed warehouse of cliché, and it's testament to the game's other qualities that we barely notice. The ship's geography is dominated by strobe-lit grey corridors and grotesque displays of torn carcasses that recall a backlog of influences from Doom to Event Horizon. And small aside here, I have to point out that of course I, who used to stay up all night playing Doom, who snuck into the cinema to watch Event Horizon as a terrified 16-year-old, was always going to love this game. If these are more generic elements though, they are occasionally and spectacularly interrupted by defining moments of originality. A disorienting fight in the floating debris of an anti-grav chamber, or Isaac's frantic stomps over the ship's outer hull against the sucking blackness of space. The thoroughness of the game is apparent in these spacewalks, where the sound of everything except Isaac's ragged breathing is swallowed in the vacuum. And sound plays a big part in creating the game's atmosphere too, the lead-heavy sense of dread that fills every inch of the Ishimura. Dead Space puts players on high alert with a standard selection of tricks, enemies you'd rather not meet, dark corners for them to hide in, and regular jump scares. The result is that we're constantly straining to see and hear where danger might be coming from, and this is where the game does some of its finest work. Power outages and rotating safety lights throw scuttling shadows, but it's the sounds of the Ishimura that keep us on the jagged edge of our nerves. In a ship filled with monsters and machines, the game blends the industrial and the organic. Screeching metal indistinguishable from inhuman howls, thudding mechanics mistaken for stalking footsteps. This clamour can be almost overwhelmingly loud, leaving us straining against the volume to pick out signs of danger, and is supplemented by an anxious, ambient drone that varies from deck to deck, as though the beleaguered ship's ailments were vibrating through the walls. The whole thing is mirrored by a classic orchestral horror score that has its own piercing strings and stomping percussion, and that includes a track with the incredible name Plasma Cutters Are Your Friend. Despite these nuances, Dead Space still sounds lean and stripped, and it's with this same minimalism that the game contextualises the horrors Isaac encounters. Revealed through logs and text files, we learn of unitology, a cult-like religion involved in the discovery of the alien artifact behind the game's transformative horrors. Crucially, we're not given specifics, just a taste of fanaticism, a hint of conspiracy.
What in God's name is going on down there?
I think that's precisely the point, Doctor. God's work.
Subtler still are nods to the wider state of our society 4 centuries from now, in the various motivational and propagandist posters displayed around the Ishimura. Where would we be without science, beams one, a bright-faced technician smiling out above a pile of skinless cadavers. There's a heavy echo of Philip K. Dick here. We can remember it for you wholesale. The enforced optimism telling us a great deal, without saying anything specific, about the arrangement of people and power needed to drag humanity this far into space. The best thing about all this is that Isaac doesn't care. Instead, he has his rusty brown suit and a long job sheet of things to fix and do, which includes cutting the arms and legs off most of what used to be the crew of the Ishimura. The thematic consistency of Dead Space is really clinched by its weaponry and enemies, and the combat that brings them together. Isaac's inventory is a toolbox of sharp, hot things jerry-rigged for survival, and key among these sharp, hot things is the plasma cutter. In one sense, Dead Space is an iteration of Resident Evil 4, and the plasma cutter is a natural successor to Capcom's laser-sighted pistol, now with 3 blue sights rather than a single red one. Upgrade it properly at the workbench, more or less a Black & Decker gun rigger, and it's the only gun you'll need to finish the game. It's a potent symbol of Isaac's unfussy heroism, a small, effective tool with one simple, practical embellishment, a revolving head that turns the strip of blue lasers vertical or horizontal with a satisfying whir of effort. The practicality of this revolving head only becomes truly obvious once Isaac encounters the necromorphs. You see, unlike the Nostromo, Dead Space does not have an alien. Instead, it has an even darker horror. Us. People are the enemy in Dead Space. People and the treacherous notion of biology itself, which has somehow transformed us into reanimated, inside-out versions of ourselves with extremely sharp elbows. The necromorphs are extraordinary. Their name an echo of alien xenomorph, and their bodies a shotgun wound wedding of Stan Winston's creature effects in The Thing, and the contorted, desolate fury of Francis Bacon's 1944 triptych, 3 Studies for Figures at the Base of a Crucifixion. Some bits of design are just so rich, ideas and images that endure and reward constant revisitation and reflection, and I would put necromorphs in this category. They capture the mortal disgust at our own flesh that underpins the Alien and so much else of H.R. Giger's work, scuttling distended mirror images that flit and flurry under the Ishimura's flickering lights. Yes, we're talking about space zombies, but man, they are space zombies with pedigree. The game's persistent stroke of genius is that brute force won't deter the necromorphs, and instead what's needed is accurate dismemberment and disposal. This is where the punchy plasma cutter comes into its element, slicing off legs, then with a bleeping revolution of the head, clipping off an arm at the shoulder, methodically cleaving along the horizontal and the vertical. This gives combat a purpose over and above the deployment of as much ordnance as possible in the shortest time. Each kill becomes a small, crafted piece of handiwork, and when combined with other weapons and Isaac's supplementary abilities, it results in a layered model of combat that's skillful in a way few horror games manage. Initially, the necromorphs come in 2s or 3s, but by the midpoint and beyond, they invade rooms in waves, squirming from vents and pouring from the ceiling in multi-directional ambushes. Late in the game, taking on a crowd of necromorphs has the dexterous feel of a well-managed physical job, completed with a reliable set of tools that the worker knows inside and out. slowing onrushes with Isaac's stasis power, clearing a cloud of crawling parasites with the flamethrower, telekinetically tossing a propane canister into a crowd, and switching to the trusty plasma cutter to harvest the survivors. The other thing about moving into the later part of the game is that the necromorphs get nastier, darker, tougher and less human, as though their blood on the outside bodies were slowly coagulating over time. It's the organic equivalent of Isaac's own evolution, where he seems to become gradually more mechanical, his upgraded engineer suit covered with racks of ridged metal plating. It's that singularity of design again, Isaac as much a part of this industrial landscape as the workings of the Ishimura itself. And actually, that's what makes Isaac's final suit upgrade so significant. Unlocked as a reward for finishing the game and equipable on a second run through is the military suit, a white rig that makes Isaac look like a renegade stormtrooper. The use of colour in Dead Space is so rigid and effective, the palette basically ascends from rust brown to a glowing gold, broken up by soothing interface blues, that this, more than defeating the hive mind and escaping Aegis 7, feels like Isaac's true escape. He has transcended, undergone a metamorphosis that sets him apart from the world, while at the same time underlining just how cohesive it is. Because, as I've been saying, the best thing about Dead Space is all of Dead Space. It stands the test of time thanks to a sense of direction and purpose in everything from the no-nonsense stomp of Isaac's iron suit to the shipyard drawl of the engineer whose audio logs clue Isaac into the necromorph's weakness.
Forget about shooting him in the body. You gotta cut off the limbs. Grab a cutter, anything like that. Cut him apart.
More than anything, Dead Space is a game with a point of view, an engineer's point of view that says building things is valuable, that design is beautiful, and that the smallest details in the mechanisms through which we interact with the world can have the biggest impact. It's a game about craft and repair, about how constructing things, making things work, is at least as important as smashing them to pieces. It's about how default heroism is boring and how a real protagonist should do things. And it reminds us, graphically, that when everything goes to hell and a stack of razor bones and flayed meat is trying to eat you with a half-human face, knowing how to change a fuse is going to be pretty handy. And that is why Dead Space is still so good after so long. Thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments if there's a game that stands the test of time for you, or if you love Dead Space, I'm very here for that. Give this video a like, give the channel a subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.